the background of this is still major conversations about repairing the damage that was done to Black people as a result of the transatlantic slave trade.
Correct.
And so I know earlier this week, yesterday we talked a little bit about reparations, the latest approval by the California Reparations Task Force.
Right.
But you brought something to my attention that I think that needed to be brought to the attention of our watchers, about the reparations piece as it relates to the global call that now people are calling for King Charles, who was coronated over the weekend, to say something, to do something. You have 12 countries that lined up to say that King Charles needs to do something about reparations. To give us some details on this, because I think this is adding to the ongoing atmosphere that justice needs to be served.
Well, absolutely. Well, this is a continuation, so it didn't start here. We heard these calls when Queen Elizabeth II died, September 8th, 2022. We saw these calls prior to this from various Caribbean countries, like Jamaica as well. We can go back to 2015 when, I think it was 2015, when then Prime Minister of England, David Cameron, was planning a trip to Jamaica, and the Jamaicans were demanding an official apology for slavery, because Jamaica is a former colony of Great Britain, and they were demanding reparations as well. He was basically saying that was a long time ago, and we should move forward as friends. Let's be buddies now. He didn't even want to have a conversation dealing with this. So this is not something new. What's taking place here is, and I'll pull up there was an article from theguardian.com dealing with back in, I think it was 2005. Jamaica calls for reparations. Jamaica should move on from painful legacy of slavery, said David Cameron. Okay. Yeah. So I'll get you some information on that. So what's taking place last week, there was a letter that was signed by 12 different nations, Caribbean nations, indigenous nations, things of this nature. And they're calling for an official apology for slavery from King Charles III, as well as they're calling for reparatory justice. King Charles should use his coronation to give a formal apology for the horrific impacts of slavery and colonialism, and commence, quote, a process of reparatory justice, end quote, according to campaigners in 12 countries where he is king. So these are countries that are still part of the Commonwealth. You have the countries are, so this was a article, this was a letter that came out, I think it was last Friday. And you have Antigua, Barbuda, New Zealand, Australia, the Bahamas, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Okay, so these are all nations of the Commonwealth, and King Charles III is the head of state of them, but they're calling for reparations. Now, this is after. So there was an article from Newsweek.com that talked about this. Now, there was a reporting coming from theguardian.com in April of 2023 that shows how King Charles III is descended from a slaveholder named Edward Porteous, who was a 17th century tobacco plantation owner in Virginia, who in 1686 received a shipment of at least 200 enslaved people from the Royal African Company. So the Royal African Company was one of the slave trading companies. It was owned by the British. It's founded around, so it's founded in the 17th century, the Royal African Company, right around 1672. Also, you have in this research, the Guardian.com has a huge article on this that talks about King Charles signals first explicit support for research into monarchy slavery ties. and they identify King William III. Okay. The Guardian has published a previously unseen document showing the 1689 transfer of 1,000 pounds of shares in the slave trading Royal African Company to King William III. King William III of Great Britain, from Edward Colston, the company's deputy governor. Now, Edward Colston is a well-known 17th century slave trader, okay, in England. And during the George Floyd worldwide protest, they pushed a statue of Edward Colston into the river, the protesters there in England. Okay, so all this is coming out. So King Charles III says he welcomes research, and he's trying to learn more about this history, things like this. Now, first of all, you're in your 70s. Okay, you mean you already don't know this history? And the monarchy is worth $20 billion. I'm like, wow. You don't already know this history. So hopefully the protests will continue around reparations from these countries, but they have to push it, and I think get worldwide support from this as well.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation about reparations and more. So stay with us. You're tuned into The Culture here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been checking in with my brother Michael Imhotep, who is a scholar and researcher, host of the African History Network podcast show. And he's here, of course, every week as we're having a conversation about King Charles who faces calls for reparations from 12 countries, as the discussion about reparations in this country, in America, continues to get louder and louder. And so we're seeing that there is a growing chorus of voices that is looking for some form of repair, some form of redemption, some form of justice that was done against African people who were enslaved. Now, my question to you, Brother Michael, and I want to go back, and of course I want to get some thoughts from the crew about this, is that what do you think is the end game of this, brother? Because in acknowledgement, I was reading those couple of the articles around this issue with King Charles,
right?
And people were saying, well, he should have said something during his coronation speech, all of those things. But what's the end game here? Because what we see in America is a host of things, from policy change, at least in the California Reparations Task Force, and there's actually folks like Boston Reparations Task Force that has been working as well. But what should the end game? So the end game be an apology? The end game, is this another push for more compensation and kind of going through this process?
Absolutely. Okay. They say all they wanted was an apology. No, not at all. They want reparatory justice. They want a repairing of the damage that was inflicted upon these various nations that have their populations decimated, that have their labor exploited, mineral wealth exploited, plantations set up like in Jamaica, sugarcane plantations, things of this nature that generated untold wealth for Great Britain. But Jamaica was first conquered in 1494 by Christopher Columbus. When you go study this, and I teach about this in my classes because we deal with this period of history, these nations have never recovered from what Columbus did to them over 500 years ago. And then these various European nations are fighting over the new land that they're conquering. So when you look at you look at the island of Hispaniola, which Columbus conquers in 1492 and calls it La Isla Española, the Spanish island, and it's anglicized to Hispaniola. Well, you have the Dominican Republic there, and then the western third of that island is Haiti, which was the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo, and the French take it over from the Spanish in 1697 and call it Saint Dominique. And in 1791, these Africans engaged in a revolution against their French oppressors. And this is the Haitian Revolution. Okay. Well, that land was first conquered by Columbus. Panama, Honduras, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, Jamaica, all of that. So that's conquered by Spain. We know Spain conquered Mexico. So when you understand, and then 1846, 1848, what war did you have that the U.S. was engaged in? The Mexican-American War, where the U.S. goes to war with Mexico. So when you understand this chronology of history, it brings you to right to where we are today and helps us better understand politics, because all this deals with politics, which is the legal distribution of wealth, scarce wealth upon resources. Now, when it comes to King Charles III, it's important to understand that the monarchy does not engage in politics. The monarchy, as you see, they have a parliament. Okay, based upon their constitution, they have a parliament that deals with politics, that deals with passing laws, things like that. Queen Elizabeth II had weekly meetings with members of parliament. I don't know what they discussed, but they don't comment on things like that. Now, so how he can engage in this, he's not going to offer an official apology. Something like that will have to come from Parliament, most likely. He has made statements in the past, like when Barbados declared that they were forming a republic and breaking away from the Commonwealth of Great Britain. He was there for that ceremony. When he was Prince Charles, he was there for that ceremony, and he talked about the atrocities of the slave trade and things of that nature. Okay, so I'm not even sure he has the authority to apologize for something like that on behalf of Great Britain. But because when Queen Elizabeth died, her net worth was $500 million, she probably could have donated some money. She probably could have cut a check from her own personal net worth. He probably could do the same thing. I don't think he will, though. But this is about repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery and the atrocities that were inflicted and the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. All right, let me go to the crew because folks are checking in on this. Janelle, my sister, you said many heirs are still getting interest and dividends from the payments they got when they lost their slaves. This is why they don't like reparations discussions, because slaveholders have been paid already.
So if she's talking about Great Britain, they just finished in the last 2 or 3 years. They just finished making the payments when Great Britain abolished slavery in 1833. They took out a loan for about 19 million pounds, and they paid 46,000 British slave owners to release 800,000 African slaves. So British slave owners were paid in Great Britain and in their territories. They were paid reparations. Here in the U.S., that only the reparations that were paid to slave owners was only applied to slave owners in Washington, D.C. That was the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862, which was sponsored by an abolitionist named Senator Henry L. Wilson. Senator Henry Wilson. It passed Congress and signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln. It freed about 2,900 African slaves. And each year, April 16th in Washington, D.C., they celebrate Emancipation Day when slavery was abolished in the District of Columbia or Washington, D.C. But those reparation payments only applied to slave owners in Washington, D.C. It did not apply to all slave owners in the U.S. You can go to LOC.gov, which is the Library of Congress website, or archives.gov, which is the U.S. National Archives, and research the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862.
So here's the thing, Brother Michael, when we're seeing this reparations discussion happen, especially like here in the state of California, and potentially it could roll out into other states, right? Mm-hmm. The attitude is still not there. There's still a lot of, and I'm saying from Black folks in the community, there's still a lot of mixed messages. There's still a lot of Black folks who not gonna say a lot, but I think there's still some Black folks who don't see the importance and value of even going through this process of calling for the repair and damage of Black people, for Black people. What do we say? Do we need to be all on the same page about this idea to make this happen? Or is this something else, or we don't? And just a few of us who believe that reparations is the best and the right thing to do, we just move out on our own.
Well, it's not even belief, it's dealing with facts and evidence. The problem is that we don't understand our history, and our history has been taken away from us. And if we, I encourage everybody to read start with the 28-page executive summary from the California Reparations Task Force. Just Google California Reparations Task Force 500-page report. Start with the 28-page summary that outlines 12 harms that happened to African Americans in this country, but also in the state of California. So the problem is we don't understand the history of what happened to us, especially after chattel slavery ended, when Georgia ratified the 13th Amendment, December 6, 1865. Don't understand the maldistribution of land. The U.S. gave away 270 million acres of land for 124 years. It's called the Homestead Act of 1862. They gave away land from 1862 to 1976. African Americans were largely locked out of that massive land giveaway, and you got hundreds of thousands of white families that still hold land today from that. So when people say this was such a long time ago, no, we can look at the effects that are very recent. When you look at Ahmaud Arbery, and who was killed in Georgia, and the three white supremacists who killed Ahmaud Arbery, they concocted a citizen's arrest alibi. Well, they did have a citizen's arrest law there in Georgia. That citizen's arrest law dates back to 1863, when Georgia was part of the Confederacy, and it targeted runaway slaves running away from Georgia plantations. That's the origin of the citizen's arrest law that existed in Georgia that they got rid of after Ahmaud Arbery died. So we're dealing with the lasting effects of not just slavery, but what happens after slavery and the Civil War, Reconstruction, etc. So when you understand history, you understand how all this still impacts us today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brother Michael, we won't have to stop it there just for the sake of time. But brother, this right here, the conversation about reparations, the conversation about Jordan Neely, man, yes, this just goes to show us, bro, that we still got a lot of work to do.
And, absolutely.
And the work is not among, trying to convince people. I'm talking about the work of getting us into a place where we see the connectedness to understand that unity is the key, that we can't move with just one person. We have to move as a single group of people. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I know this
is a battle for the African mind. This is a battle for the African mind. Dr. Jacob Carruthers, who's an ancestor, now one of our great scholar warriors, he said it doesn't matter how many white people we convince. He said this is a battle for the African mind. So this is what we have to understand. Your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. So as Bantu Stephen Biko, one of our great South African freedom fighters who was portrayed by Denzel Washington in the 1987 movie Cry Freedom, said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. We must take our minds back.
There it is. Brother Michael Imhotep, host of the African History Network podcast show. You can find all of the great work he's doing at the African
History Network.com.
Yep. And Brother Michael, I truly appreciate you, brother, for coming on and being a part of
it. And check us out there, because we have my online classes Saturdays and Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, online history classes. So you can register for them there. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. Saturdays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. Egypt, one of the original names for Kemet. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade. And then Sundays, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement, 1800 to 1968. So we get deep into this history, and the information is PG-13 as well. It's very visual. There's about 180 articles we reference between the two classes, over 250 slides, video clips, etc. I'm a historian, put together the curriculum for both of these classes, theafricanhistorynetwork.com.
There it is. Thank you, Brother Michael. Truly appreciate you, brother.
All right, Brother Farajii.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. So Saturday, May 6th, King Charles III was coronated in England, in Britain. And there have been growing calls for reparations coming from 12 countries that were conquered, or countries that were part of the Commonwealth. Many of these are Caribbean nations. Now, you remember back when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, and she died in September 2022. Okay, I think that was September 8th, 2022. You remember we talked about the legacy of Great Britain and when it came to slavery and colonization, and how 100 years ago, one fifth of the world's population lived under British rule. Okay, 1/5 of the world's population lived under British rule about 100 years ago, at a time when you had 700,000 people under British rule and 2.5 billion people in the world. All right, so there have been a number of articles written dealing with how different nations, Caribbean nations, Jamaica, Antigua, Barbuda, Australia, a number of nations are calling for reparations and calling for an official apology for slavery. Okay, so we're going to talk about that on today's show, and I'm going to let you hear once again the segment from Roland Martin Unfiltered that we did on September 9th, 2022, when we talked about, in that segment, we talked about Jeff Bezos, and we talked about the professor originally from Nigeria, Uja Anya, and I gave some history on Queen Elizabeth II and the British colonization. Okay, that video has been viewed over 300,000 times, and you can watch that on Roland's YouTube channel and his YouTube channel, Roland Martin, and much, much more. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, and we did free class sessions this weekend for those also. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, to register for those. All right, so I want to jump into this article here before we go to break. There was a good article from Newsweek.com, dealing with the growing calls for reparations from Great Britain. Okay, now it's important to note that the King, as well as the Queen of England, does not get involved in politics. They don't have an authority to Parliament takes care of politics, okay, based upon the constitution there that they have in Britain. The King does not get involved, as well as the Queen does not get involved in political issues. They don't get involved in passing legislation. They can't pass legislation or things of this nature. All right. But when Queen Elizabeth II died, the monarchy was valued, the net worth of the monarchy was valued at $28 billion, and her personal net worth was valued at $500 million. Okay. I think she could have written a check to somebody. So I'm just saying. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is from May 4th, 2023, from Newsweek.com. There's articles from the Associated Press on this as well, and CBS News. Now, King Charles III should use his coronation to give a formal apology, for the horrific impacts of slavery and colonialism, and commence, quote, a process of reparatory justice, according to campaigners in 12 countries where he is king. Now, world leaders and royal family members will gather at Westminster Abbey Saturday, May 6th, to watch King Charles and Queen Camilla be crowned. Okay, I ain't watching none of that. I don't care about it. I saw when I got up, it had already happened. They were still talking about it on MSNBC. I saw some of the post coronation analysis. I watched a little bit of that. I could care less about him being coronated. All right. However, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy. which for some remains a symbol of Britain's imperial past. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. All right, the calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. All right, so right before the break, I was talking about some articles that I was looking at this weekend. And there's one from the Newsweek magazine, newsweek.com. And I posted this article on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And it deals with how you have 12 countries that are under the rulership of Britain, where King Charles is head of state of these. They're part of the Commonwealth. And they have put forth a letter demanding reparations from Britain, as well as demanding a formal apology for slavery. The name of this article, if we go back to this here, the name of this article is King Charles III. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is written by Jack Royston from May 4th, 2023 for Newsweek.com. So the article goes on to say, however, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy. However, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy, which for some remains a symbol of Britain's imperial past. First Nations, indigenous peoples, and advocacy groups in 12 countries where Charles is king released a joint statement this past Wednesday, May 3rd, which was also sent to King Charles himself. Now, an excerpt from the statement says, quote, "We, the undersigned, call on the British monarch, King Charles III, on the date of his coronation, being May 6, 2023, to acknowledge the horrific impacts on and legacy of genocide and colonization of the indigenous and enslaved peoples of Antigua and Barbuda, New Zealand, right here, New Zealand, Australia, the Bahamas, Belize, Canada. We're here in Detroit. Those are our neighbors. Canada, Grenada, Jamaica. Now, everybody talks about, come back to Jamaica again and again. I don't really know know if people really understand that Jamaica was conquered by Christopher Columbus in 1494, conquered by the Spanish. Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A lot of these places where we like to go vacation were colonized, and oftentimes by multiple colonizers. So the Jamaica, for instance, first colonized by the Spanish under the master of genocide, Christopher Columbus, and then the British are going to take over Jamaica. You have Haiti. Haiti was conquered by Columbus in 1492 because Haiti is the western third of the island of what Columbus called La Isla Española, the Spanish island, which was anglicized to Hispaniola. And in 1697, the French take over the western third of the island of Hispaniola from the Spanish in 1697, and it was known as the Treaty of Ridgewick, the Treaty of Ridgewick, and they call that colony Saint Dominique. The Spanish called it Santo Domingo. Then in 1791, there's a revolution. There's a revolution in the colony of Saint Dominique, and in January 1st, 1804, those Africans declare their independence and call that colony Haiti or Haiti. This is the Haitian Revolution. Well, they were conquered by Christopher Columbus on behalf of the Spanish crown in 1492. Okay, so a lot of these places where we like to go vacation have never recovered from the treachery imposed upon them by the Spanish, the French, the British. These countries were conquered over 500 years ago by Columbus. They have never recovered from this. We have to understand Puerto Rico, conquered by Columbus. Panama, Honduras, they've never recovered from what has happened to them. Quote, our collective indigenous rights organizations, among other organizations who are working to help our communities recover from centuries of racism, oppression, colonialism, and slavery, now rightly recognized by the United Nations as, quote, crimes against humanity, also call for a formal apology and for a process of reparatory justice to commence, repairing the damage. So I know we like to go to Jamaica and get our groove back like Stella, but you gotta, understand the history of what's taking place. Now, my same sentiments for Queen Elizabeth II when she died are basically the same for King Charles and Queen Camilla. Basically the same thing. They're colonizers. Let's call it what it is. Okay. Now, May 19th, 2018, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I did a broadcast, and this is on YouTube. You can go watch it. And I said, Black people watched the royal wedding and got teary-eyed, but forgot about the history of the transatlantic slave trade. They forgot the British involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. So the opulence in all the pomp and circumstance that you saw displayed on Saturday, a lot of that was because of the exploitation of African people and the murder of African people being worked to death. So this is why I don't sit up and get entertained by these colonizers. Now, it is true that King Charles mentioned previously, I don't know about on Saturday, but previously it is true. He mentioned the atrocities of the slave trade and things like this. It is true that he does support researching the British involvement and the monarchy's involvement in the slave trade. Okay. So there are a couple of articles that dealt with this. So there's one from the Associated Press that came out April 6, 2023 that talks about this. Okay. Now we have to understand, Britain was involved in slavery for 272 years. They were involved in slavery for 272 years, and the British kept excellent records. So I really don't know what the hell you got to research. I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay. The BBC has excellent records on this. I use some of their stuff in my classes. Okay. I don't know what it is that you still have to research, but then, okay, that's what you want to do. Okay. Whatever. So let's look at this article right here. Associated Press, April 6, 2023. King Charles III supports probe into monarchy slave ties. King Charles III supports probe into monarchy slave ties. Okay. It's in this article. It talks about how King Charles III, for the first time, for the first time, has signaled support for research into the British monarchy's ties to slavery after a document showed an ancestor with shares, S-H-A-R-E-S, shares in a slave trading company, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said on Thursday. So this came out April 6, 2023. Okay. This was exposed in an article from The Guardian. All right. Now, Charles has taken the issue, quote, profoundly serious, and academics will be given access to the royal collection and archives, the palace said. Now, the statement was in response to an article in The Guardian, which is a United Kingdom publication, theguardian.com, the Guardian newspaper, that revealed a document showing that the deputy governor of the slave trading Royal African Company transferred so this was a slave trading company, the Royal African Company, transferred 1,000 pounds of shares in the business to King William III in 1689. Now, the newspaper reported on the document as part of a series of stories on royal wealth and finances, as well as the monarchy's connection to slavery. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the future of radio, talking about the history of colonizers. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We'll be back in a few minutes. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, help us keep broadcasting, stay on the air, keep doing the research. $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay. And we have the information on the homepage of our website. Stand by. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, Future Radio. All right. So right before the break, we were talking about growing calls from 12 countries that are part of the Commonwealth of countries that have King Charles III as head of state, growing calls for a formal apology for slavery as well as reparations. Now, when I refer to the royal family as colonizers, I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I'm calling them colonizers because 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world population lived under British rule. They were colonized, and you had 700 million people who lived under British rule at a time when you had 2.5 billion people on Earth. So I'm calling them colonizers because that's what they did. So I just want to make it clear. It's not a racial statement. It's a historical statement. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So I want to go back to this article here briefly. Then we're going to go to clip number 1, Doug. And I want you to hear the conversation from September 9th, 2022 on Roland Martin Unfiltered, when I dealt with some of the history of Queen Elizabeth II and the Great Britain and their legacy of slavery. If we go back to this piece here from the Associated Press, the news. So this is dealing with the report that came from theguardian.com in 2023 that showed that one of Prince Charles's ancestors was involved in the slave trade and involved with the Royal African Company, which was a slave trading company. The statement was in response to an article in the Guardian newspaper that revealed a document showing that the deputy governor of the slave trading company, of the slave trading Royal African Company, transferred 1,000 pounds of shares in the business to King William III in 1689. The newspaper reported on the document as part of a series of stories on royal wealth and finances, as well as the monarchy's connection to slavery, as well as the British monarchy's connection to slavery. Okay, now King Charles III ascended to the throne last year after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. His coronation, we know, took place May 6th. The king has said he's trying to deepen his understanding of slavery's enduring impact that runs deep in the Commonwealth, an international grouping of countries made up mostly of former British colonies. Okay, deep. So now this, I know King Charles is busy. You know, you trying to deal with people that don't want you to be king, and I know he's busy, but he's in his 70s. He's trying to deepen his understanding of slavery's enduring impact. Why don't you go to Jamaica and talk to those Africans there and let them educate you on slavery's enduring impact? Why don't you go to Barbados and talk to those Africans there? I know Barbados broke away from the Commonwealth. Why don't you go to these nations? Why don't you go to Nigeria? That was a colony of Great Britain. Why don't you go? So he's in his 70s. He's trying to deepen his understanding. I don't understand that. I'm sorry. I just don't. During a ceremony that marked Barbados becoming a republic 2 years ago, Charles, who was Prince Charles then, referred to, quote, the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history, end quote. English settlers used African slaves to turn the island of Barbados into a wealthy sugar colony, like they did a lot of other places. Sugar was king. Okay, so they did that in a lot of other places, like Jamaica. Okay, same thing the French did in Haiti. Now, Saint Dominique. Now, the research into the monarchy's ties to slavery is co-sponsored by Historic Royal Places and Manchester University, and it's expected to be completed by 2026. Okay, it's going to take them 2 years. Okay, all right. Check. Slavery ended in Britain in 1833. 1833. It ended in Britain 1833. They were involved in slavery for 272 years. It ended in 1833, but it's going to take you 2 years to do research. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this article here. So he does support research. Now, I don't know what else he supports, but he does support research. You have the one from, so we talked about the one from Newsweek, and there's a growing call for reparations. These 12 countries, there's a growing call for reparations and a formal apology. Now, if we go back to the one from Newsweek, newsweek.com, name of this article is King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is from May 4th, 2023. All right. If we go back here, and this is on page, I think this is page 3 where I want to go. We're going to clip 1 in just a minute, Doug. Okay, right here. Beyond an apology and reparations, the campaigners want the, quote, return of all cultural treasures and artifacts stolen from our peoples throughout the hundreds of years of genocide, enslavement, discrimination, massacre, and racial discrimination by the authorities empowered by the protection of the British Crown, end quote. And, quote, the repatriation of all remains of our collective peoples that reside in UK museums and institutions and that represent our family histories, genealogies, cultural history, and spiritual ancestry. They want it all back. Okay, now that's what I want to hear about. I don't want to hear about some colonizer being coronated. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about that. I want this is what they want: the artwork back. They want everything that was stolen from them back, all the physical artifacts that are in British museums, and they charge admission to see what they stole. They want all that. These Caribbean nations and indigenous nations, they want all of that back. Okay, they want to repair the damage, and they want a formal apology, but not just apology, not just saying I'm sorry, let's be friends. They want you to acknowledge what you did. Okay, not King Charles himself, but the British monarchy and Great Britain. They want an acknowledgement of what happened. Now, on September 9th, 2022, I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we talked about the death. This is the day after Queen Elizabeth died, and we talked about that, and we talked about Uju Anya, Professor Uju Anya, and Jeff Bezos going after her, all that stuff. Okay, let's go to this clip, please, Doug.
Now, the Professor Uju Anya, she didn't back down. Now, Twitter did delete that particular tweet from her, saying that it violated their standards. Not sure how that's the case. But when you begin to look at her Twitter feed, boom, she said, if anyone expects me to express anything but disdain for the monarch who supervised a government that sponsored the genocide that massacred and displaced half my family and the consequences of which those alive today are still trying to overcome, you can keep wishing upon a star.
Okay, pause it right there. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, so we have who we have here. We've got Lila Starr. We have Sonia. Okay, Sonia said, yes, that's the only thing I want to hear is reparations. We've got Kenya Russell.
It's what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They may have their areas of expertise, but some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. We have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this.
Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and check out we did 2 free class sessions this weekend of my 12-week online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. When you scroll down the website, it has information about our radio show right here on 910 AM WFDF, our PayPal and Cash App information. We have the 12-week online course here. So you can click right here, register now, free class session. And then you can also register for the full 12-week online course. This time around, we're going to do 13 or 14 weeks of the class. It's on sale $60, regularly $130. And then our second class, the one I teach on Sundays, the one I did today, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We did a free class session today as well. This course is discounted to $40, regularly $130. Even after the course is over with, you can go back and watch the entire class. Okay, we have a bundle pack for $80, but 2 years from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. So your access does not expire. All right, I want to go back to the story here dealing with King Charles III and the British monarchy. And I want to go back to this clip from September 9th, 2022, when I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, okay? And we dealt with the passing of Queen Elizabeth. She died the day before. Before we go back to that clip, just quickly, I want to show you this from Wikipedia. And this is a map from Wikipedia. This is a map of the list of countries that gained independence from the United Kingdom, okay? A list of countries that gained independence from the United Kingdom. It's one thing to just look at a piece of paper and see the names of these nations, okay? It's something like 120 nations going back to probably 1931 that gained independence, starting with Canada. Well, United States, 1776, we know that. But Canada, 1931. But when you look at the map of the world and you see all these nations that were under the control of Great Britain, then all of this starts to really sink in, okay? And then you look at Africa, they got so many colonies in Africa largely because of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. South Africa gained their independence in 1931. Lesotho, 1966, and Lesotho is an enclave inside of South Africa, like Highland Park, Michigan is an enclave inside of Detroit. Botswana, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Egypt in 1922, Sudan, Gambia. Then we look at Israel, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, Jordan, Pakistan, India, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia. Okay, you look at all that. Australia, 1942, New Zealand, 1947. Then we look at Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Grenada, Dominica, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Canada, okay, Ireland, Malta. So when you look at a map of the world and you look at all this, you say, I'll be damn. Okay. No wonder all these people are upset. Kenya, I forgot Kenya. Kenya, 1963. Can't forget Kenya. Facing Mount Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta. Kenya. All right. So, yeah. So you can say you interested in learning more and you're in your 70s. Are you interested in learning more about the history? Come on, man. Okay. Let's go back to this clip here. We're going to start at the 5-minute mark. Dub.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to be backing down from any of that. There was some other, I'm looking at some other tweets that she had posted. Again, she had, all kind of different tweets. She did respond to Jeff Bezos. She said, everyone you and your merciless greed have harmed in this world. Remember you as fondly as I remember my colonizers. Wow. Again, her tweets have spurred a reaction. Carnegie Mellon did offer a response. This was what they posted. They said, we do not condone the offensive and objectionable messages posted by Yuju Anya today on her personal social media account. Free expression is core to the mission of higher education. However, the views she shared absolutely do not represent the values of the institution, nor the standards of discourse we seek to foster. So here's what's interesting. And this was a tweet here that Yuju retweeted. Reminder that Queen Elizabeth is not a remnant of colonial times. She was an active participant in colonialism. She actively tried to stop independence movements, and she tried to keep newly independent colonies from leaving the Commonwealth. The evil she did was enough. She was talking about this article here. This woman was, it says she was tortured with axes during Kenya's struggle for independence from British colonial rule. As Britain celebrates the platinum jubilee of its monarch, this old fighter wants to send her a message: let Elizabeth bring what belongs to me. Let's go to my panel here. I find it's very interesting when I said this last night, Michael, it's very interesting when people, they have this view that when someone passes, you in the first 24, 48 hours, first week, you can't say anything bad about them. You hear the phrase, you can't say anything good about somebody, don't say anything at all. I saw a video, D.L. Hughley, he said that people should have compassion when someone dies. But I saw these pieces, I saw this back and forth, and these tweets from Uju Anya, and she talked about how her family was devastated, how they were massacred. And in fact, there was an interview that she gave, and she said this to the person in the interview. She said, I am the child and sibling of survivors of genocide. From 1967 to 1970, more than 3 million civilians were massacred when the Igbo people of Nigeria tried to form the independent country. And I said this, and I think it's important for us to say it. So people are angry that individuals who dealt with genocide because of British colonial rule are not celebrating her life the way they want them to. Yet again, people gladly condemned Fidel Castro. And so this goes to what I always talk about. The person that controls the narrative controls how we think and feel. And frankly, the view in this country is don't say anything bad about Queen Elizabeth II because she was a great, wonderful, happy person, and ignore colonial rule and its impact on indigenous people.
Well, you know, Roland, this is one of the reasons why the Black Star Media Network is so important. And last night I did a 3-hour broadcast dealing with Queen Elizabeth II, British colonialism and slavery, because I watched a lot of the coverage all day long on MSNBC. That's basically what I had it on all day, watching MSNBC, and they didn't deal with any of that history. Okay, the opulence, when they showed all the footage and going back decades, and they showed the gold carriage, drawn by 30 horses, and they show all the people in their regalia and things like this. They don't talk about the British colonialism that exploited people, tortured people, enslaved people to create the billions of dollars. So you see that opulence displayed, you know. So when now within the last maybe 3 hours, New York Times just published an article. In Africa, the Queen's death renews a debate about the legacy of the British Empire, and it deals with Kenya and the Mau Mau Rebellion. Okay, when you go, I did a lot of research yesterday on Queen Elizabeth, but also on Great Britain. When you look at how many African countries they got from the Berlin Conference of 1884, okay, and you look, they got the Gambia, Nigeria, where that sister's from, okay, they got Ghana, Sierra Leone, they got Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, okay. When you go talk to those African people who have relatives who were killed by the British Empire, they have no love for her. They have no love for King Charles III. But May 19th, 2022, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I did a 2-hour broadcast, and I said, Black people watched the royal wedding and got teary-eyed, but you forgot about the transatlantic slave trade. Because I said she married into, this is no disrespect to Meghan Markle, I said she married into a family of colonizers. They're not colonizers because they're white. They're colonizers because Britain colonized 1/5 of the world population 100 years ago. 1/5 of the world population was under British rule. And they didn't rule with kindness. They didn't rule with a smile. They ruled with brutality. So I don't wish anything ill
on Queen Elizabeth II. I sure as hell don't miss her. And I hope some more join her. Seriously. Go study the history of the British Royal Empire and how they got what they got. These are some demons. These are colonizers. I understand. I may have expressed it differently than Uja Anya, but I totally understand what she's saying, because those were her relatives who were massacred by these white supremacists, by these colonizers, who then want to put a handshake and a smile. They won't even have a conversation about reparations with Jamaica. Jamaica's about to sue them for reparations. They won't even have a conversation about reparations. So I have no love lost for them.
Here are some, Eton Thomas, former NBA player, Kelly, he posted a couple of videos on his Twitter feed. I thought, might as well play both of them. Just want to give folks a look at this. So check this out.
In 2022, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II became the first British monarch to celebrate a Platinum Jubilee. The celebrations took place over a 4-day bank holiday. Millions of Brits partook in street parties, and people around the world joined in on the celebrations. But is celebrating the British monarch harmless fun, or does it normalize the monarchy's long history of colonialism? And is it a celebration of British imperialism? Here are 4 ways in which the British royal family has benefited from colonialism. They have historically benefited from the enslavement of human beings. In 1562, John Hawkins was the first Englishman to include African people in his cargo. He traded these people for ginger and sugar. On his next voyage in 1564, Queen Elizabeth I funded a vessel for his journey. The British East India Company was formed in 1600 to exploit trade with Southeast Asia. They did that by colonizing land and exploiting people through the transatlantic slave trade. The figure who signed the Royal Charter allowing this all to happen was also Elizabeth I. Between 1690 and 1807, an estimated 6 million Africans were transported from Africa to the Americas on British or Anglo-American ships. The royal family and the British Parliament protected the trade. After Elizabeth I's death, the Royal African Company was established in 1660 by the Duke of York. The company transported more than 187,000 slaves who were often branded DY for the Duke of York. It's difficult to say how much the royals benefited from slavery, but many say it funded the entire British treasury. And it's safe to say that much of the monarch's significance, power, and wealth stems from the enslavement of Africans. Lucy Worsley, the chief curator of Royal Historic Palaces, says that all royal palaces from the 17th century have an element of money which is derived from slavery, including Kensington Palace and Hampton Court. The royal family was built on a legacy of stolen land, goods, and atrocities. Queen Elizabeth II's largest diamond, the Kohinoor, was stolen from a 10-year-old prince in India along with his land in the 19th century. It was transferred to Queen Mary in 1911 and was handed down to the current queen. Both India and Pakistan have asked for the diamond's return, but it's still very much owned by the crown. In India, between the 1700s and mid-20th century, an estimated $45 trillion was stolen by the British under the vestiges of the crown. Famines which occurred as a result of Britain's non-intervention policy led to the death of more than 30 million Indians. In 1947...
Now, that was sort of like part 1, then that was also a part 2.
She wanted to get Britain out of India quickly. The decision to carve up a country led to 15 million people being displaced and between 1 and 2 million people dying. Of course, this is just India. At its peak, Britain had colonized 25% of the world's surface. From the Mau Mau massacre in Kenya to concentration camps in South Africa, Britain, under the vestiges of the crown, has a long and bloody history of colonial atrocities. And the royals have historically been at the center of them. The prestige of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is an organization of 52 independent member states. What it actually is a collection of former British colonies and Rwanda and Mozambique. The Commonwealth originated after World War II, when much of India and Africa was becoming independent. The Commonwealth claims that it is an association of sovereign nations working towards shared goals of prosperity, democracy, and peace. But critics say that the association promotes neocolonialism through free trade agreements, which favor more developed economies. British companies own more than $1 trillion of Africa's key resources. The Queen is the head of the Commonwealth, and Charles has been appointed her successor, which allows the British monarchy to remain in a position of international privilege and go on tours of Commonwealth countries. But that's not all.
Right there, Doug. Pause the clip right there, because we run out of time. All right. So watch that. Roland has that on his YouTube channel, and I'm about to we're going to rebroadcast the episode of the African History Network show from September 11th, 2022. I've uploaded that. We're going to rebroadcast that like all week. All right, and that's on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. Okay, we're gonna go to the phone lines quickly here. Line one, we have PG. PG, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Good morning. I should say good evening. I am calling from the city of Southfield, Michigan, the great city of Southfield, Michigan. And I wanted to ask you a question. So we know that records were not kept very well for African Americans. And I think most of us are probably able to, without much difficulty, go back to our great, maybe our second great grandparent. How will it be determined who should get reparations? And do you think that a lot of our people right now are living in what you call emotional reparations in terms of the mindset?
How will it be determined where? Are you talking about in California or are you talking about in the United States in general?
In both areas. Because you were talking about California.
Yeah, so in California, they're going to do it based upon lineage, and one of the things that they want is they want an agency in California similar to the Freedmen's Bureau to be set up to help African Americans trace their ancestry. So they would have to trace it back to a person of African descent that was in the U.S. prior to 1900. Or trace it back to a person who was enslaved in California. So it would be, they've identified about 1,500 people who were in like a semi-slavery or slavery state in California from 1850 to 1865. Because even though when California came into the Union in 1850, they came in as a free state. You did have some who violated that law. Slavery was California does not have a real history of slavery, and slavery was abolished in California, but you did have some who violated that law. Okay, so they want an agency set up that would help African Americans trace their ancestry. As far as the federal, as far as reparations at the federal level, they're gonna have to do the same thing. Records going back to prior to 1900, 1899, 1898, that's not that difficult. 1760, 1660 is a lot more difficult, but going back to like right before 1900 is not that difficult. The reason why they have to do it based upon lineage and can't do it based upon race, can't distribute reparations based upon race in the state of California is because race-based policies in the state of California are illegal. So they want to make sure that whatever they do is legally structured. So when lawsuits are filed by Republicans and their Negro allies, that whatever reparations are distributed won't be overturned in court. Okay, so at the federal level, if people really understand how to get reparations enforced at the federal level, because it's not going to be through HR 40. I don't know why people keep trying to push that.
So am I understanding you accurately that if a person in California cannot prove that someone in their lineage came through California, or they can't prove their African ancestry, that they would not get reparations? Or is it safe Correct. To assume that anybody that's black mixed with something would get reparations?
No. The California Reparations Task Force already voted. It has to be based upon lineage. The reason why it has to be based upon lineage is because race-based policies in the state of California, based upon California
I heard that
law,
part.
But I'm explaining it because race-based policies in the state of California, because of existing California law, are illegal. So they have to do it based upon lineage. Otherwise, nothing is going to be distributed. They have to do it based upon lineage.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. So I want to ask you like a hypothetical question. So my lineage that I know is black, white, and American Indian. Would that qualify me for reparations?
Qualify you for reparations where?
as far as reparations for slavery.
Are you talking about in the state of California, or are you talking about the federal level?
No, I'm talking like here. You told me about California. You explained not race because of the policy, and it will have to be done with lineage. So if my lineage here in the state of Michigan, and if we ever get to the point where California is, I mean, realistically, not the Detroit little reparations committee that they talk about on the radio, but if they get to that point,
the guidelines,
with me being
PG,
that I know is black, white.
PG, we run out of time. The guidelines in the state of Michigan have not been set yet, so we don't know. These are the guidelines for the state of California. The guidelines in the state of Michigan haven't been set yet, so we don't know. Okay, thanks for calling. Keep listening. All right. I want to go to we get thanks. Okay, I want to show you this article very quickly here. I mentioned it from the New York Times, and this is called "In Africa, the Queen's Death Renews a Debate About the Legacy of the British Empire." In Africa, the Queen's death renews a debate about the legacy of the British Empire. While some in Africa pay tribute to the deceased monarch, others stress Britain's violent colonial history on the continent. So when I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, this is the article I mentioned. This is from September 9th, 2022. Okay. And it talks about, okay, so read this. I don't have time to get deep into it, but I want to give you that article, the name of that article, so you can read it. Also, there's a good one from National Public Radio, NPR.org, National Public Radio. Name of this article is "Not Everyone Mourns the Queen." Not everyone mourns the Queen. For many, FOR, for many, she can't be separated from colonial rule. September 12, 2022. And in the article, it says, when she took the throne in 1952, Queen Elizabeth II, when she took the throne in 1952, more than a quarter of the world's population was under British imperial rule. That was more than 700 million people, including in parts of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and the Pacific Islands. Okay. And okay, so read the rest of that article. All right, now we're gonna switch gears here, and we're coming up on the break. When we come back from the break, I want to deal with this story of members of the Proud Boys who were convicted of seditious conspiracy. They were convicted. This was Thursday, May 4th, and we talked about this when I was on Farajii Muhammad show, The Culture. Okay, this is significant because Enrique Tarrio, who is a former chairman of the Proud Boys, he was convicted, and he wasn't there in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Okay, listen to the African History Network show on Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes.